thank you so much, Dan, for inviting us. And we're really happy to be here. We were here 2 years ago, so we'll be talking about the sacred science of ancient temples. I studied architecture, I studied telecommunications engineer and psychology. So then I mix everything, and my passion in life since 15 years, has been sacred geometry. That's how I met Dan a long time ago on the internet. So we've been working together for like 20 years.
We're that young.
Yeah. Amazing. So then I translate everything into Spanish, and it's hard to barely understand in the translation.
We did events all over South America, thanks.
Yeah, we really had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Hello everyone, I'm Lydia. Maybe some of you were in 2017 where I did another presentation here about geophysical anomalies. So I'm also an architect, and I have been looking a lot into how architecture can affect our health and our healing also, like also in a negative and a positive way. So many years ago, since I was around 18, I had this question. What about this earth radiation, and what about temples? I had a big question on that, and one of the equations in this was, why do temples seem to be located in particular locations? And what are the parameters of these locations? So one thing to the other, and I ended up doing a 5-year PhD, which I just completed last year. And thank you so much. And many years ago, I came into Dan. I came to his house, and we exchanged a lot of research and ideas and devices and protocol, all of this protocol. So I'm very grateful for Dan and opening this network and getting to meet Arturo. So we put all our knowledge together, sacred geometry, geobiology, which is this part of science that deals with how Earth's fields influence the biosphere, basically. And we created this institute called Geophilia, for the love of Earth. So today we will see a lot of different things, but starting, let's go through a few temples around the world, because what you will see is a lot of energy and effort and money and time. Some of these temples took decades or centuries to be completed. So we had a big question, like, why did people put so much resources to build these temples? What was the real reason behind it? And we will try to look at it from many perspectives with backed up science. So just open your eyes, your heart, your intuition, and have another look at these temples. We see different forms, right? But looking at all these different temples, I think one thing we can all agree is they have high level of fractality. And we will go into what fractal is a little bit more, a bit later. But what I'm meaning to say, do you anywhere see here one straight line, like you see 3 square lines, straight? No. There is a high level of detail of fractality. So there is these similarities, and there are other ones that we will go through. We have temples from the 1600s, 300s, with different shapes. But again, we can see all these different levels of fractality. So the big picture is again found in the small picture over and over again. We'll go through a bit faster because we have a lot of material to cover. But just let your soul be guided through these pictures around the world. It's a nice journey. India, 400s. Check all the details, the design. One of my favorite temples that I've visited is in China, the Temple of Heaven. Beautiful, extremely beautiful. The feeling inside was just amazing. Then we go to ancient Greek temples. I don't know if any of you have had the chance to visit them. It's very different kind of design, but then again, we see all these details, all these fractal details. We have rectangular and circular ones. And there are very specific parameters that are also found in the mosques with all this beautiful sacred geometry that Tufan explained us in such an amazing way before. So we have imprinted, let's say, the structure of the universe in the micro and the macro scale in a building. Like, how beautiful is that? So I'm sure you can agree with me, like, why did these people put all this effort and time to build that? I don't think that just for religious purposes is a answer that fulfills us, is it? Like, there is something else behind that. There is a lot of big investments. Let's say the biggest investment at these times were temples. At this time, they didn't spend money in other things to own personally in that level, but everybody agreed that they wanted to invest. Pyramids all around the world from different times. Why did they bother creating all these huge structures? There has to be another reason behind it. And just for you to know, all the times that I've put there is kind of what is now archaeologically accepted. That doesn't mean that we agree with that. My personal opinion is that there are a lot of these temples that come from another era, because we still don't know how, in a construction level, they can be made today. We don't have the means to make them with all our crazy technology today. So my personal feeling, and Arturo's also, is that they are built from another time, probably another cycle in our lives here in this planet. Mexico, Egypt. Then we have the stone circles, which is another category of temple. And I call it also a temple because it has the same characteristics as a temple. And we will see what these characteristics are further in this presentation. But again, all these huge stones were carried from very far away in all locations that they have been made. And they were weighing some tons each. So why would people bother making that and carrying them and putting them in a specific astronomical, maybe, correlation and geometry? Just always a big question. And then we have other megalithic monuments like Petra. This is a really beautiful monument. This temple is megalithic. If you've never heard of it, research into it. It means that it has been entirely carved in stone of one piece. So it was not built piece by piece. Imagine the work and the labor that thing has. 700 CE. And then we have the beautiful Gothic cathedrals, of course, with all the incorporation of sacred geometry and fractality everywhere. So, you know, one pattern, then you have it in a smaller and then in a bigger scale. So there is this resonance of pattern everywhere. All around Europe. So, Geophilia is the Institute of Space Harmonics. What does that mean? We want to create a space that has the highest level for harmonics. You want to share a little bit about that?
Well, these 10 aspects that you now know, space harmonic must include fractality, made with phi ratio, the proportion 0.618. Basically comes the measurement that we use, it's from Planck length. So what Dan was explaining that the teraphite does is you take the 1.616 times 10 to the minus 34 meters, and then from there we start multiplying by 5, by 0.618. And then you have very specific measurements.
The
sacred measurements, and the temples use those measurements.
Exactly.
Creates harmonic inclusiveness. It's built with the materials that has phase conjugation, which means like the more natural the material is, the better. The more artificial is not so good because it loses its natural fractality. It creates this bioactive field, has centripetal force, create longitudinal waves because it resonates with sound. The better it resonates sound, the more fractal it is. Amplify the DNA bioactive field like as an antenna. So in the macrocosm and the microcosm, we are in the middle, the mesocosm. So where we live is this resonance that can create this harmonic inclusiveness from the macro to the micro. And integrates the geometry of the earth, the human, and the sky, which a lot of temples do that.
you could just say that the reason golden ratio creates harmonic inclusiveness is because it's the maximum constructive interference. So the most harmonics can live together without fighting. And the point to be made is that heart rate variability, medical science is clear, that's the fastest way to measure the health of your immune system, is the harmonic inclusiveness of your heart.
What is fractality in very simple terms? Fractal is a never-ending pattern, or infinite complex self-similar at all scales. So we will go very fast through it. I mean, usually this is a presentation we give in hours. But we will compress it and we will have a level, so no problem.
You get the big picture.
Yeah.
Arturo,
So,
could you see him just
oh, sorry.
just a little bit?
Where?
The other people. but
Where can I dance?
I don't know.
So fractals
A chair?
in 2D. Oh yeah.
Yeah, take that with the camera. Thank you. Sorry.
Fractals in 2D are very boring. Fractals in 3D, like buildings.
Much better. This work.
In nature, in geometry, in algebra, in everywhere in our body, in antennas, in plants, in fractal. This is simulations of fractal. This is our cell phones. They literally have fractal antenna. Like literally, these things have fractal antenna. That's why you remember in the old time these radios that have these compressed as fractal. So in the cosmos, of course, golden spirals, more flowers, fractals, phi ratio, more fractals. In our heart, it's made as a fractal. The trees, our lungs. This is a pentagon. This is a real picture, not Photoshop, from a storm. And then you can check how platonic solids and different figures can fit as a grid. The pentagon is specifically located as a pentagon, and then these kind of layers of insulator and conductor as a capacitor. And then this amazing geometry, all fractal, in colors, in geometry. This is my house here.
House, yeah.
Hopefully one day, but no, not yet. But you see this idea of having like water and then earth, water, earth, is this idea of building a capacitor, building
Dielectric layers.
And your other house?
This can you see? This is you're in the pyramid of the moon, and then you see the angles here are the same angles.
Just follow
here.
that line.
Yeah.
Yes, and then follow that line and see the similarity.
They
That is another level of fractality,
Oh,
let's
yeah.
say.
So
Yes.
they're imitating
The mountain.
the mountain.
Embedded.
This is in Africa. Fractals. This is how you can measure what living materials are more fractal, because they have more waves embedded in the microscale.
That was heart rate variability, literally. Fractal.
And the DNA, our DNA, like this X that we see, is actually a lot of like a spaghetti braided 7 times until we see here the antenna. And then the torus, and we all know what is it about. What is phi ratio? Phi ratio, this is like the definition, is two quantities are in golden ratio when their sum to the larger of the two quantities is the same. So basically this one. Planck length, this is the unit, 1.616 times to the minus 35 meters. So this is the Planck length, very, 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 very small. And then from the macro to the micro, we are in the middle. Harmonic inclusiveness is the number of contained harmonics is a living oscillator. This is the example, and then you can apply that same concept to sound. You can apply it to sound, to fractals, to Manfred lines. A lot of the work I've done that you have seen all this information. Cymascope, so you produce a sound and you transform it into geometry. Phase conjugation basically is when you see the image and you see it back and forward, you see the same image.
Is self-correct, even in optics. You can correct a blurred image by a good phase conjugate lens.
And we know this information, like how fractality sucks and create this gravitational field. Bioactive field, the difference of a cancer cell and not a healthy cell. All the reference about how fractality can go through life. This, the egg transformed from being a sphere into a torus once it's ignited by the sperm.
Dimple, perfect dimple.
And our subtle fields, the subtle fields. Why is it used in the therapy? This is the scale. We are here in the middle. And basically what we use is this scale.
Which is 1 foot.
1
We
foot.
were talking the
Yes.
sacred measurements before.
This is how you transform. the
Yeah, we
counters.
talked about Paul and also Tufan talk about it, so
Yes.
we can move on with that.
Yeah.
Great. A lot of nice slides.
Yeah.
No kidding, no one.
What,
Get these slides.
what are the frequencies of a sacred space? These are.
Those are the actual frequencies that Elizabeth Rauscher used to prevent reduced pain measured. It turned out to be my equation.
And then this is what we use, basically. In sacred architecture,
Yes.
you use these specific proportions and ratios.
So let's talk a little bit about temples. So if we take a temple, we see basically 3 elements, right? We see the body of the temple, and then we see the location, which has to do with the earth. We see the astronomical relation, and then we have the temple itself that is made of 2 main things. It's made of materials, and it has a specific shape. So these are the 4 elements that we will look into in like a summary now. There's location, the geometrical design, the material properties, and astronomical connection. These are the 4 basic elements. So looking at the Earth location, and I'm sure you have all heard about Earth grids. This is something that has been looked in by different scientists. It's something that different researchers have imprinted patterns, and they're talking about these node points, like these grids have node points, and these are happening places, or there are places where we have anomalies, geophysical anomalies. So I'm sure you've all heard of the Bermuda Triangle, for example. Or in other places, there are manifestations of these as volcanoes. Or in a lot of these places, there are manifestations of that in temples. So there is a long history about dowsing and about Chinese feng shui and how they worked with the energy of the dragon lines, they call them. And in the past, they said that nobody would ever build a dwelling before checking it. And this is a knowledge that we've lost today because we are, more profit-oriented and we don't look into the health aspect of architecture anymore. But this is something that in all civilizations had a way to look into it. The Egyptians had their own, the French, for example, had their own. This is actually a military English troop in India trained as a dowser because they wanted to find water resources and things like that. Going a little bit faster into that, what is geobiology? It's the science that has to do with how a site, a location, can influence the biosphere. Biosphere means basically humans, animals, and plants. And Hippocrates, the father of medicine, of modern medicine, let's say, because I don't really know what happened before him and how many civilizations of healing and other type of medicine we had, but for this era that we live in, he said clearly in the text, and I have it also in ancient Greek, that geographic location and the ground typology are as important factors for health as other things. So it's not just the physical body, he mentions a lot of parameters, the age, the microclimate, all these parameters, but he clearly mentions that if you want to heal someone, you have to take into consideration the location and the geology where they're living. In the bottom here is the ancient Greek text. And then in this research that I was doing, I was trying to categorize all these different types of geophysical anomalies. And I will just give you really quickly now the sum. These anomalies are just places, because it's a fancy name, right? It might sound to you a bit complicated, but basically imagine that there is a specific number, a value of a field, let's say of the magnetic field, and then there is a place where it drops or it goes very up significantly. So that is a geophysical anomaly, or a geopathic stress zone. Maybe some of you have heard of this term. The reason I don't like this term is that by itself means that this area is pathogenic, and I don't really agree with that, because you will see a bit later why. We have 4 types of phenomena that are the most important that I wanted to talk to you about. We have geoelectric phenomena, which means that there are fluctuations of the geomagnetic field that depend on the solar motion and the winds. What that means is basically that in a location we can have these anomalies caused from these fluctuations. In there is the Schumann resonance, which basically depends on this Earth ionospheric cavity. And you have maybe heard some people saying that this Schumann resonance has changed, but I don't agree really with that, because for that to change means you have to change the distance between the Earth and the ionosphere. And as far as we know, that hasn't changed. These frequencies are between 10 to 25, and they're really important. And in this phenomena, basically, what happens is that when we have a very conductive material in the ground, keep that in your mind, we can have any amount of magnetic shifts getting inducted, meaning that this surface area or this material inside the ground can generate an electric current because of the shift of the magnetic field. And that phenomenon is called induction. Just keep the basic concept in your mind, because I promise you it will all end up in one conclusion at the end. There is a second type, which is the hydrogeophysical anomaly, and that has to do with when water passes through a porous material, there is an exchange of ions between the water and the ground, and you end up having water positively charged and the ground negatively charged. So what these two do is they generate an electric current, and that by itself creates a magnetic field. So we have a magnetic anomaly again, and that also affects the other fields of the Earth. So that's the second type of phenomenon. That's what basically happens. Then we have the geological phenomena that are when we have these discontinuities. Imagine you have one type of soil and then another, and in this place you have different conductivities. So that by itself can create magnetic fluctuations, and we have more of these type of anomalies. And these can be measured with different types. The piezoelectric phenomenon is one of them. It's really important because what quartz does is it can store this charge. And also when it's kind of pressed, there is a stress on it, for example, in an earthquake situation, that will generate by itself electromagnetic field. It's important to know that the conductivity of the soil will change when there is water, because water is highly conductive, as we know. So by definition, when we have underground water, we know we will have a more conductive area. What does that mean is that in that area, when we have underground water, not only from the phenomenon that we described before, we will have a higher intensity of these anomalies, and we will have higher levels of these let's say electromagnetic fields created by Earth itself. And then the fourth category is this light phenomena. There are many scientists that have mapped these emanations that you see there, which is like a plasma sphere that kind of gets created by these anomalies in the Earth, combined with the air at that time. If the air is highly ionized, we will have this plasma effect at the end. A lot of work has been done in a laboratory, and they have been able to replicate that, what we have found in nature. Maybe you've heard that phenomenon called as orbs. I don't know if all the pictures that show orbs are real, and sometimes it can be dust particles and other things, but I do know that there are ones that are really true, and they have been measured with instruments, because it's not only the photograph that captures, but the ionization of the earth, for example, and the voltage.
And similarly, would you say that it's thought that they would appear where you have lots of woods or anything organic, but you almost never see them in a metal building?
Never.
Yeah, and that electrical difference is...
And I can tell you something that will make sense a little bit later. One night I had the privilege of going inside the Parthenon, which is not allowed, by the night shift guard, inside the temple, when nobody was there.
He liked you.
Actually, he was a friend of my friend, so otherwise you cannot go, it's not allowed. Anyway, he told me, and unfortunately he couldn't give me the picture because he said, I'm afraid to do that. He told me that he has a night picture of inside the Parthenon with almost no light, full of orbs. And I am literally melting to get that picture, imagine. But we are planning to do measurements, so we will have more data, and I will tell you more about that.
It's conditioning the space.
Exactly. And imagine that today the Parthenon is not at its full structure, right? There are parts missing, it has been distorted, it has been bombed. So still there is this emanation. Imagine how it would have been at its full structure. Sometimes I'm trying to imagine, but it's not so easy to think. All these fields affect humans, animals, and plants in many different ways. And that was all the research that I went in my PhD. But basically, let's say for the humans, we have iron in our blood. We have 60% of water. We have a type of semiconductors in our body that can really make electromagnetic waves travel very fast. Then we have our own electromagnetic fields of the heart and of the body that can be measured. So we understand that we really interact with these fields, even if they are very subtle, because these fields, for example, that are found in nature are not like gigahertz, for example, that is the Wi-Fi, and don't have that intensity. But it has been shown that they can also interact very deeply with our body. The electromagnetism is another science that looks into how, for example, body voltage is important for health. And there's an amazing book called Healing by Voltage, if you want to look into that further. Yes, yes. So he shows that, he shows that things can be regenerated, for example, when you have different voltage, amputated limbs of frogs and things like that. This is one of the examples of research that shows that people living over these anomalies, which means for long term, right? Keep that in mind, for long term, can develop different diseases, including blood diseases and neoplasms, and higher level of morbidity, which means people died more in these areas. This, for example, was a very big study done in 2002. And this, I'll just give you this as the most important example. This is in St. Petersburg. And with gray lines, the black lines are the rows. With gray lines, you have all the fault lines, meaning seismic faults, okay? And that also means conductivity discontinuities, two types of soils meeting. And then you see with yellow the high levels of cancer, and in red the highest. And if you can see, the highest ones occur in the cross sections of these faults, which means that there is a clear relation of where we live and where our body is exposed, especially the hours of sleep that our body needs to regenerate, and our health.
That's very important.
Yes, and there are other studies that have been done, like the one in Vienna in the university with 800 people showing changes in their body, minerals, etc. I will move through because that's a lot of things to talk about. Days. Animals use magnetic fields for navigation. So you can imagine when the fields are distorted, they can lose that. And also there are other effects done in cows that they developed health problems when they were placed in geopathic zones, as it's called. And that's why the ancient people put animals to stay in two locations, and then they tested their intestines. Maybe you've heard of that. And that's kind of, people say, oh, it's witchcraft or whatever, but one side of that is that they were basically looking at health. The intestines are the most important organs that show health. So if they saw that the animals developed cancer, for example, in that location, they would never build. But that was, in my opinion, one of the ways. I think they had some other type of sensitivity. Plants also show different variability in shape, and they have their own ways to express stress. That was another study done also in apricots. And there is another side to the long-term exposure. So there is an effect that is called hormesis, which says that the same agent can be used long-term with negative side effects, but short-term and in a low dose for therapeutic work. That applies to homeopathy, that applies to exercise, for example, that applies to a lot of things, because basically the short-term stress can increase the number of mitochondria per cell, which means we can have more energy, for example, and we can have rejuvenation, whereas in the long term we can have illness.
It does apply to Therify, we think, also.
Exactly.
Yeah, because even now they're saying 3 minutes on and off, Dr.
Stelios.
Yes. Yeah.
The last times we have been there, we've done exactly that. I felt better.
Yeah, it's also why they said, you know, the ancients said, be in this sacred temple for a short time.
Exactly. That's where I'm going with that.
Sorry.
Okay. So radiation hormesis is also applies to the general concept of hormesis, which means if we are, let's say, exposed to low dose gamma radiation, for example, we can have a DNA repair and detoxification. But if we have that in a long term, we can develop sickness. So what about temples now and their locations? Here's an example of 104 monasteries, and all of them seem to be located on top of faults. Red, you see the monasteries, and with gray, you see the faults. It's really remarkable. So why they would choose to put all these monasteries on the faults? All the different mounds that were artificially created have the same properties, like they seem to be located in these areas. And in the right side, you can see an ancient stone chamber in America and the magnetic anomaly. Can you see it clearly on the right?
Where the spirals converge.
This is on the right, magnetic intensity of Stonehenge, and I'm sure you can see the white. Just look at the colors. It doesn't matter looking more into the numbers, but the color shows you by itself that there is a magnetic anomaly there. These are 4 different maps. Just please focus on the left one. This on the left one is a radon map. It's a radon map of UK, and with darker blue, you see the areas with higher radon, which also means more radioactivity. And with red, you see all the locations of the megalithic monuments there. So that's an amazing correlation. And then on the right, there are more charts. The second one is magnetic. The third one is gravity. And the fourth one is the geologic map. So that was a long study, but basically the result that I can tell you is that there is a very, very high correlation. The same applies to France. On the left we have uranium, and on the right we have radon, sorry. So both of them, as you see on the left and on the right, you have with red and black, the different megalithic monuments. And again, there is a very high correlation. This is Spain. On the left, we have gamma radiation. So you see how they are clustered around the areas that have higher gamma radiation. And on the far right, there is a magnetic map. So they are very clustered around these magnetic anomalies, which for me was really fascinating. And this is Portugal, again, radon on the left. You see how they are clustered around the highest radon values.
Those are the temples or the...
The temples are with black dots.
Okay.
And on the left we have radon, and actually on the right we have granite. The right-hand side is the granite.
Yeah.
So they are almost all located above granite.
Granite is highly piezo and famous for radon.
Exactly. That's electric tomography from Chichen Itza in Mexico, and it shows below that it's located on a huge body of water. Remember what I was telling you, that in the areas that we have underground water, we will have a very high amount of electromagnetic fields. And this is looking in ancient Greece, faults with the purple lines and blue with the temples. Again, that was a long study, but I can tell you it was a very high correlation. Different maps that I drew in Greece with different ancient temples. For example, here the faults are in yellow, right? And then you have the blue. Very important monuments. I'll just move through that. That was also in Turkey that I did some analysis.
With Tufan.
Yes. And then the geometrical design. You want to talk a little bit about that?
This is the from the work of Stefan Cardinot. It's like, how could you see the morphic field of a square?
The capacitive shadow, as it were, the charge envelope. So you see destructive and constructive interference, and that's the real physics of Feng Shui.
Yes.
The
So
right angle is evil because...
you see this pointing, this arrow.
Yeah.
So when you have curved materials, you don't have that.
And even a pent side would be much more constructive. So Feng Shui knew the physics a little bit.
So basically there has been some research showing that if you put fruits and vegetables under a pyramid, you can try that at home, you can keep them for far longer. And it doesn't matter, listen to that, what the pyramid is made of. There is an effect of shape that is very clear. And I want to show you this example. Professor Konstantin Mail said that in order to make the best transmitter with maximum range at the minimum transmitting power, you need to build it as a tuned cavity. What does that mean? And not as an antenna. Look at this. This is a tuned cavity, and it's a modern magnetron. What that makes it is the best, let's say, most efficient transmitter. And I don't know if you can see any similarity, but basically that's what temples did. Mm-hmm. They were made as a tuned cavity. What does that mean in simple words? We have an envelope, we have a cavity inside, but the construction is made in such a way with geometry that it can perfectly be tuned for specific frequencies, which is like what we will see after. But they have all very, very special proportions.
The slide where the fruit was preserved by the pyramid, I mean, a little short ad, but the Therapy Center in Nashville, Tennessee just announced that the flower shop across the street doubled the life of all their flowers and potentially doubled their business.
Exactly.
Therapy.
We have another florist.
Yeah, you want the smallest and simplest version of a temple, you have a Therapy, and that's it. So remember the magnetron that I showed you 2 slides ago? It's exactly the design of a temple of Palace of Diocletian, for example, in the bottom. It's this same tuned cavity. There is a lot of work around sacred geometry that has to do with our health, it has to do with the different ways it can be applied in temples, for example. I'm showing you a lot of different plants here, but this is a whole seminar for hours and days, basically. Just look through the images. And then there is the next parameter.
Oh, that was the head of the Sphinx on the door.
Yes, exactly. How it can apply it in houses, etc., which is part of the work that we do. And what about the materials? A lot of, if not all the temples that I've looked in have a high content in silica quartz, which is relating to the piezo effect that we were talking before. The stones that are used were limestone, granite, and other crystal-bearing rocks. And also, they have a really high amount of like very specific design in a level that, for example, you cannot fit even a card. In the Parthenon, when they took apart two round slices of the columns, after 2,000 years, there was no oxidation in the copper that was holding it together. How did they do that? I don't have an answer to give you yet, but the precision was of ultimate importance to keep all this work of the geometry and the materials and the earth radiation going. Also high content of magnesium, clay, iron, and very magnetic stones. An example of that is the Bruce-Preselli stones in Stonehenge that were carried from very far away, even though there is rocks available in the area of Stonehenge. So.
And you should mention a lifetime of work by Professor Callahan,
yes.
The layering of paramagnetic diamagnet,
exactly,
which is the resistance versus the conductance to magnetism. That layering was critical to growth, for example.
Exactly. And then we have the astronomical relation,
which is how to link the macro cosmos with the microcosm.
Which means creating more fractality.
You know this story. The belt of Orion, it's represented in China, Egypt, Mexico. So exactly this tile between the pyramid of the sun, the pyramid of the moon.
So that is kind of mirroring the sky on the earth. So that is creating like a pattern resonance again, a shape resonance.
You also have linked the solstice and the equinox.
That is images from different monuments and their alignments.
We could mention we have an expert on what happened in the history of Orion. Is Med here?
Here.
Yeah, we have an expert on the ET history and the Orion story in the room, when you're ready.
So for example, when one of these temples is aligned with an equinox or a solstice, for example, it's actually kind of infused with the energy of that time, which is very particular, right? So it's kind of receiving, imagine all the energy from the earth below, it's receiving a particular energy from the astronomical relation, and then the body of the temple is putting these things together. So that brings us to let's move a bit forward on that, because there is a lot of data. That takes us to the questions why they were built. That is a question that I think for most scientists is a big unanswered question today. In our opinion, I can sum it up to this: mystical experience, healing, seed growth enhancement, and energy generation. And I will explain to you why. There is a lot of research being done with EEG, for example, in different monuments around Europe for now, and we want to do more around the world. That shows that, for example, specific frequencies that are found in this monument can affect the brain in different ways, giving a higher level of activity in the right lobe of the brain, which is the way to see scientifically how we can have a mystical experience, or as you want to call it, an altered state of consciousness, basically. And that results from different research. Healing, for example, in ancient Greece we have the Asclepia temple. Asclepios was the god of healing. And again, they were made with a big amount of complexes, including an ancient theater, which was used for psychodrama. There was almost always presence of spring water, which means also underground water there. And thinking about the effects of hormesis that I mentioned before, it's about short term, like people would stay there 1 day, 2 days, they would not live in temples. So keep that in mind, it's really important, because the same agent as a temple that can be good for short term can be destructive for long term. Also, there have been many samples of seeds found, for example, all around Latin America, in pyramids, and also in other sites in Europe. And there have been a lot of measurements of these fields showing that the seeds were really highly activated. So people use these devices, a temple as a device, for seed growth. Now you don't need to build an entire temple, though you have a therapy for that.
This is Yuka's field. He's going to talk some about
exactly,
that later.
Beautiful. So plant fertility, you see, the first ones have not been taken to a pyramid. This was in the Acapana pyramid in Latin America, and the bottom ones are the ones that have been activated. So there were really big differences in that seed growth. And the last, for now, because maybe researching more into temples later on we can tell you about more functions of them, but for now these are the most important. This is a Russian study that was done on the concentration of the energy of the pyramid. And the Russian physicists concluded that this pyramid is made for energy concentration. And it makes sense. Why? Because it has an insulator outside, a conductor inside. So it's clearly made for that reason. And on the top, there is a way to, let's say, link that energy with above. And where is the pyramid placed? On a huge, large amount of underground water. The Temple of Solomon is an example that has all these parameters that we talked about, just as a very old temple that was designed with this way. And that brings us to our new book, which has all this research that we just described. It's called The Power of Sacred Location. You can find it from Amazon. We have an amazing foreword by Dan Winter, and we thank him very much for that. And we also have a foreword by Professor Stavros Papamarinopoulos, who is a professor that I have been, a professor of geophysics actually, that I have been collaborating since years. You want to say something about that?
Read it. We also, for 20 years that I have been doing sacred geometry, then I studied architecture, so we started applying sacred geometry to architecture. So this is the other book that Dan was talking about. We have like, I don't know, 50 different projects. Also with Michael Rice, a friend of us, he also have like 100 projects there. So there is a lot of information. We cannot cover it now, but what we did is all this research, all this data, how can we apply it to our normal daily houses? How can we, when clients ask us, I want my dream house, how can I design it? So a lot of parameters we take into consideration, like for example the voice analysis. We take the voice analysis, we transform it in the CymaScope, we have a basic geometry, and then from there, okay, where can you place it? And sometimes it's not so easy. The truth is that it's not so easy to these ideal geometries, and when you go into the real world, how much it costs, how you make curves, how you make circular things, in the practical world is not so easy, because whenever you make something curved, you lose a lot of space. You win in fractality, and you win in, let's say, in the feeling, in the electromagnetic feeling, but in the practical, you don't have circular beds, you know? You don't have a furniture that is circular or is square. So it has been an amazing journey to
and
do
also
it.
Other things that we use is we use 5-element chart and classical feng shui, and that we owe it to Mr. Roger Green, because I did his course many years ago, a really amazing course. We do measurements of earth radiation with all the tools that we have, and electromagnetic noise, the artificial, and there is a lot of things kind of blending all this knowledge that we have for all the things that we have looked in together.
And sometimes, for example, you have a place, a building or a house, it's already there, you cannot change it.
Yes.
So what can you do? I mean, you can put the Theraphi and then the end of the story, but if you cannot put the Theraphi, what can you do? What type of powders, what type of changes? And sometimes it's small changes and makes a big difference. This is one of the last projects we did. So this is in Mexico.
It's called Earth Angel, and it's an eco-spiritual community.
So it's kind of mixing some more rectangular shapes with, in private spaces, rectangular shapes are easier, and in public spaces, circular shapes or spiral shapes are kind of, are better, you know. This is some pre-rendering, it's not the final renders, but it's like kind of the idea that you can play with different architectural forms, because also the styles are very different. The architectural aesthetics or styles are very different and communicates so many things. But what we have been looking in these last years, and it's so amazing, it's that all around the world more architects and more designers are using fractals. Like naturally now, a lot of facades are using fractals. It doesn't matter what type of fractals, but in the architectural language, more and more people are
looking for that.
Looking for that, because they're bored of the same thing, of the same facades. And we are now just beginning to do a new research.
So what happened is that we have put together a few years ago with Dr. Stavros, and Dan has been our consultant from afar because he cannot visit us for now in Greece. But we have a beautiful project which we got permission for Greece for 50 ancient Greek temples. We got permission from the archaeological authorities to carry out very detailed measurements, both on the Earth, meaning with classic geophysics, all the devices that I have, and others, like with some electronic engineers. And also we will put 32 people, volunteers, to be measured with different devices, including the biowell of Dr. Koratkov, but also taking samples from the saliva and the blood. and we want to see how this area affects. And we are just about, just make a prayer for us if you want, because it has been a very tough journey. We are just about to take some funding, public funding, to do the first one, which is the one I'm showing you here, is called the Asclepio of Lendas, or Levina, which is the name in ancient Greece. It's in Crete. It was one of the most important healing temples. So that's just about to happen, and I really hope we make it, and we have some good results that we are going to share in publications and in articles, and we will know more things from there practically.
It's such amazing dedication, and put that together. Lydia has struggled against serious challenges, and she has come through, serious. And I'm here applauding.
Oh, thank you so much.
I just want to say, in that temple study, a little brainwave, flame in mind, HRE, all of Patrick's toys,
yes.
Perfect to measure something. Yeah.
Yes.
Just a thought.
We have 5 minutes questions. 1 minute, please.
Actually, I was translating for Arturo and Lydia this year in May.
Poor woman.
And we had more time to go through all of this, and we had this beautiful talk because Dan was also speaking in that conference, yes. And you didn't mention that actually people were not only using temples just to go there and heal, but also go there and die. And we had this beautiful talk
yes.
about to die correctly, exactly. And how to,
yes.
I mean, in the spiritual world, we
yes.
use the term the soul,
yes.
but we can, use a lot of other words. I am not a scientist, so I don't know. A plasma field and electromagnetic field. In human design, we call it the personal crystal. So then there's an energy contraction, and it's directed using the field or
yes.
temple. Awesome. Then it could create the perfect environment because the electromagnetic field continues for like at least 72 hours after the moment of biological death. So
yes.
Yeah, the physics of death is what we're doing later today for sure. In detail. Yes. But so it's very great that you brought it up. Absolutely.
Can we say, because in the work that we did in Turkey,
yes.
we came to that conclusion, like we can go there also to die.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. And
I agree completely.
And how you propagate into what's called heaven and the immortal and planes of Sharon, we're going to talk about in terms of longitudinal, the perfect echo. So that's the physics of this afternoon. In detail. Yes.
I want to show you 1 minute. This is another project we did. This is Super Adobe, all 22 chakra related. This is the entrance. But because this is not for living, it's down, it's a room like up is a room for a hotel, and down is a healing place. We did it as a torus. So this is down, this is in the first, and this is in the first floor, let's say. So we can put a lot of fractals, we can use a lot of natural materials, and then the client asks us to locate this. This is all the piece of land, and she asked us to locate here where can be like the best place to locate them. So all these electromagnetic maps and these fields, we use them to see where can be like the best place to put, let's say, the heart of the place. And then each one of these duplex, what we did is, because it was 22, there is 22 chakras in the Egyptian system, so we sent to the Simascope to UK to transform all these the specific nodes of every chakra to an image, to a cymatic image, to a geometrical image, let's say. So we have all these 22 cymatic relation of the let's say of the chakra with the geometry, and then what we did is we put here under each of every one of those, under the let's say before the floor, let's say under the tiles, we whip it like with metal wire. I will show you.
A special mixture of metals.
It's here.
Did you make it paramagnetic?
Yeah, like this. So, like this. I mean, this is not in the floor, but we did all the geometric grid under the floor. And then we check it, like what happened, what changes. And it's really amazing because what Paul was saying about consciousness is absolutely true. Like if you're not relaxed, like when you're in the therapy and you're not relaxed, it cannot go through you because you're not trusting. Yeah. So if you're like in this stress, the field cannot go through you. And we discovered, because we've been working for 20 years with so many people, some people that do not believe in it, like say, no, this actually doesn't exist, and their consciousness do not allow the patterns to influence them, they do not influence them. It's like, they
you have the
very
close, basically.
Yeah, you have the glow, and very little it can influence you. But if you relax, these patterns can change your electromagnetic field.
Yes.
Other question?
We love your passion.
Latino passion.
Latino passion.
I was just thinking about what you just said, because I thought maybe then that means that the person observing your nice patterns and your nice shapes, then the influence between the person observing them.
Well, that would be a bit, the pattern itself was psychoactive, so observing the pattern helped them embed better, perhaps.
Even the roundness of the buildings, like when you're saying the angles, when something's nice to look at, then that affects how the person observing it feels.
Yes,
and then
but
maybe that influences the actual.
yeah, what we have seen is exactly what Paul said. Like, there is the external world and the internal world. And inside of you, you have not created enough sacred geometry, and your inside temple, there is no temple that can heal you. There is no sacred geometry that can do anything. We have lived it for 20 years in clients. Like, if you don't build your inner peace, you can be in the middle of the Himalayas and you will still be inside of you.
And what is the perfect solution to that? Is you build your inner temple, and then you live inside the temple, and you have this coherence. And then that's the best effect you can have.
That's bingo.
Great. This lady, please. You hit it.
Yes, well, I also want to say, would the technologies such as the Verify influence you to think differently without really opening that door and unlocking that door? Would it naturally influence you?
Well,
or do you still have to?
There's an artist in LA who was an artist and very creative, not necessarily into these kind of things. And he was lent to Verify, and he was just blown away because when he had the Verify for the weekend, he came up with 5 new sculptures while he was in the Verify. So he was like, this is incredible.
But I'd like to say, we're going to talk about how spin density is information density is time this afternoon. And so from the Verify, you get spin density. It's like when they put the gold crown of jewels on the king, it was implosive capacitance, so his thoughts would speed up. Now if he had a good temple inside, then he'd have more bliss and he'd inhabit the kingdom. His aura would become the land. However, if he was angry and nervous and upset and mad at everybody, he would go nuts faster.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It works both ways.
That's true. I can show you this. That happened to this.
It happened to spin.
This project. This project it's a Montessori school. It's based on a double golden spiral. Like, this part was already made, we couldn't do it, and all this is it's a new space we built. So it's all made with natural materials called blah blah blah. All the natural things, organic, and because golden spirals make things faster. You go like in tornado. And the couple that was there was a couple. They broke, they divorced, because they start getting a lot of things that they have not worked as a couple, and they, like lies that they had, secrets, they start getting out.
You try to have secrets, it's toast.
Forget it.
And then,
Secrets are
and then they divorce. They don't divorce because of the geometry, but they already have their internal things, and the external geometry amplifies it.
Yes.
But on the other hand, these energies affect animals. What kind of inner temple do they have?
Well, they're attracted to Stonehenge for sure.
Well, and the ley line and all that. And do you have any evidence that
get into the middle in the sweet spot on the Therapy.
They're a perfect antenna.
Yeah, but they don't have an inner temple.
No, well, that's true, they at least know how to be attracted to charge.
Well,
I think they
don't
have
know
it
about that.
instinctively.
I would
from what
say
I've-
that
yeah.
most of nature, the problem with humanity is that we've thought too much, and
Exactly.
led us astray from nature.
Yes.
All the animals are naturally in harmony.
Exactly.
Long after humans are gone from this place,
Yes.
nature will survive. We don't have to save the earth.
We do have-
We have to save the earth from us.
Thank you, guys. We do have panel discussions later, this was fabulous.
One more question.
Oh, okay. Sorry, we're late, but.
I wondered if there, a lot of churches have steeples that are sort of pyramidal shaped, but I've noticed they typically have an octagonal base. And I wonder, do you see any energetic function in that shape?
In the octagonal?
And the steeple shape.
Well,
This, you mean that
I
kind
could
of
just say
thing?
that the classic answer is the sharper the point, the more you're going to project charge.
Yes.
If you want to release the charge, use a point. But if you want to hold the charge, then you're an Eastern church, and it looks like an onion. And there's a distinct functional difference geopathically. And so the churches with steeples have a completely different.
Yeah, so it's an antenna and
That's
a
right.
capacitor.
Okay.
And they're
Yes.
often used in conjunction,
Yes.
like in Washington with the dome and
The onion at the other side.
Yes.
And then, so they're very different from a spherical temple versus a peak.
Basically, one is projecting, the antenna is projecting,
Right.
and the other one is absorbing. Masculine, feminine.
Right.
That's it.
Right.
Yeah.
So very, and you can measure it electrically. But we're late for lunch,
Yes.
guys. This
Okay.
is wonderful. Panel discussion, thank you.
We will leave some cards of Geophilia here. It has all our contacts, our website. If you want, I'll just leave it here for you, okay? Thank you very much.